Okay, this is the second part of the 4.10 lesson for demanding change. And we were on Birmingham confrontation and consequences. Civil rights advocates warned President Kennedy to offer more open and active support for their struggle, but the president was still trying to walk a line between fully supporting civil rights and not alienating Southern congressmen whose backing he needed to get others' measures passed. Black leaders concluded that the Kennedy administration would keep its distance from the struggle unless they could raise the pressure to the point that the president would have no choice but to take a more active role. To achieve this goal, black leaders sought to use the power of the media, especially television. Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference decided to set their sights on Birmingham, Alabama, the South's most segregated big city, with a stubborn racist Eugene Bull Connor as police commissioner. King and the SCLC were counting on Connor to overreact. If they could provoke Connor's men into a display of wanton violence, with television widely broadcasting the images, they could build vital support for the civil rights movement. Project C for confrontation began on April 1963 with calm sit-ins, then a small march in Birmingham City Hall, and boycotts of stores that refused to serve blacks. Connor's police arrested the demonstrators, and city officials banned all protests against segregation. More marchers came to the city, including King himself, who was arrested and put in jail. There he wrote his powerful letter from Birmingham jail, addressed to fellow clergymen who had called his protest unwise and untimely. King defended the principle of civil disobedience and the deliberate violations of unjust laws. Protesters who sat down at lunch counters, he wrote, were in reality standing up for the best in the American dream. King drew a distinction between just and unjust laws and affirmed that an unjust law is no law at all. The Birmingham campaign was a direct application of that principle. Jim Crow laws were unjust, and African Americans would no longer recognize their validity. The logic of civil disobedience, action and reaction, now played out in the streets of Birmingham. King urged his followers to withstand violence by the authorities without resorting to it themselves. The protest organizers sent thousands of black children into the streets to face certain arrest. Thousands of blacks, including many children, were thrown in the city's jails. Connor turned his police loose with clubs, snarling dogs, and high-intensity fire hoses. Most protesters remained nonviolent. A handful hurled rocks and bottles. Television cameras and news photographers sent images of the violence around the world. The reports were an embarrassment to the city's white business leaders who were eager to reach a settlement with King. The televised violence compelled the Kennedys to act. The president with his brother, the attorney general, pressured SCLC and white leaders to make a deal. They agreed to end segregation in public facilities, to be enforced in stages. King declared victory for the moment. And we can see here a picture of police dogs attacking a demonstrator during an anti-segregation protest in Birmingham in '61. And then down here, high-intensity fire hoses on protesters. Kennedy speaks out. With black anger threatening to overwhelm pledges of nonviolence, Kennedy now put the power of the presidency into the struggle. Until mid-1963, he had remained cautious on the question of civil rights and willing to jeopardize Southern Democratic congressional support for his broader legislative agenda. But Birmingham was a turning point for JFK. He told a reporter that news photographs of a police dog attacking a black woman made him sick. On July 12, 1963, Kennedy went on national television to propose a wide-ranging federal law to end racial discrimination in employment and in places of public accommodation, such as restaurants and hotels. Every American ought to have the right to be treated as he would wish to be treated, as one would wish his children to be treated, he told viewers. Kennedy's speech, which he wrote in longhand minutes before the broadcast went live, was the most forthright statement on race relations by an American president up to that time. Americans, he said, were confronted by a moral issue. It is as old as the scriptures and as clear as the American Constitution. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who will represent him, if in short he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us could be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content with the counsels of patience and delay? It was a momentous evening for the civil rights movement, but also a tragic one. On the night of Kennedy's speech, a rifle bullet fired by a Ku Klux Klansman in Mississippi killed the NAACP's Medgar Evers, an Army veteran who had been barred from voting in 1946. I have a dream. Senior figures in the civil rights movement, including A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, had long been planning to march on Washington. Until Birmingham, they hadn't been able to spark much enthusiasm. Now, with new energy infusing the movement and Kennedy's civil rights bill pending in Congress, a massive march on Capitol Hill made sense. Like Roosevelt in 41, Kennedy urged the black leaders to back off. This time they insisted on going ahead, arguing that the demonstration would channel a growing black anger into constructive, nonviolent dissent, though they shifted from a march on the Capitol itself to a massive rally at the Lincoln Memorial. The crowd that gathered on August 28, 1963, overwhelmed expectations, swelling to an estimated 250,000 people, white as well as black. They marched peacefully to the Lincoln Memorial. They sang songs such as We Shall Overcome. Late in the day, with the statue of Abraham Lincoln at his back, Martin Luther King Jr. addressed the sea of eager listeners. "I have a dream," he declared, "that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. On that day," he concluded, "all God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of that old Negro spiritual, 'Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty we are free at last.'" Oh, I get so emotional at this stuff. Oh, continuing on. And then here is an excerpt of the I Have a Dream speech. Okay, so here is the transcript of his I Have a Dream speech. What I would like you to do, well, first of all, let me read the beginning, and then I'll explain what I want you to do. On August 28, 1963, Martin Luther King was not the only speaker at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. This massive gathering at the Lincoln Memorial featured many other speakers, singers, and performers. The introduction of civil rights hero Rosa Parks met with thunderous applause. But the day has gone down in history as belonging to Martin Luther King Jr., who delivered the singular oration forever associated with the spirit of the civil rights movement. And you will find on the next few pages the excerpts of his speech. And instead of me reading it to you, because it loses as much of its appeal when I read it to you, because I'm not a fantastic orator as Martin Luther King was, I'd like to go back to the lesson. If you go on to page 5 here of the lesson, you will find a link to his speech, and you can listen to it here. And the video will go on and we'll hear his speech. And the speech will go on. And if you would follow along with the transcripts here, that would probably be the best. So you can have your textbook open and then be listening to the speech here at this website as well. So that's what I would recommend for completing the reading from this lesson. It makes it more powerful and meaningful to listen to his actual voice giving the speech. Okay, and then we're going back then to the lesson. So don't forget to check your reading guide with the lesson answer key. Make sure you have that filled in with the correct answers. And then we continue on. And it says, in the case of Brown versus Board of Education, gave millions of African Americans hope. It would take confrontation, however, to force the government to act. Okay, after you've completed the reading, return here to complete the following activity, letter from Birmingham Jail. Make sure to read What's the Big Idea. Remember this, African Americans had lived in segregated societies throughout the South and much of the North since the end of Reconstruction, but the events of World War II and the post-war era changed expectations and demands. Grassroots activity on the part of civil rights leaders and ordinary citizens brought the issue of race relations to the forefront of the national news and thinking. All right, so let's look at the activity, letter from Birmingham Jail. Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference began Project C in Birmingham, Alabama in April 1963. Their goal was to increase the pressure on the Kennedy administration to take a more active role in the struggle for civil rights. King was arrested during a march and put in jail. There he wrote his letter from a Birmingham jail, which was written in response to a letter from a local clergyman who called his protest unwise and untimely. In the following screens, paraphrase each excerpt from King's letter by either putting what King wrote into your own words or by answering the question. Click Reveal before moving on to the next screen. Click on the speaker icon to hear someone read the excerpt. Click Next to proceed.
You may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, and so forth? Isn't negotiation a better path? You are quite right in calling for negotiation. Indeed, this is the very purpose of direct action. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks so to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored.
Okay, and I was just playing around there, and that's what it gives you when you hit reveal, what it gives you for the suggested paraphrase. So let's go on to the next
Just as
one.
the prophets of the 8th century BC left their villages and carried their "Thus saith the Lord" far beyond the boundaries of their hometowns, and just as the Apostle Paul left his village of Tarsus and carried the gospel of Jesus Christ to the far corners of the Greco-Roman world, so am I compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my own hometown.
Okay, and then what do you think? Why do you think King used religious comparison here? Well, remember the audience he was writing to fellow ministers that were criticizing what he was doing. So let's reveal. King was a clergyman. It was probably natural to use religious examples. Also, his letter was written in response to what clergymen wrote, and perhaps he felt that fellow clergymen would more readily connect with a religious comparison. And then just King continue on doing this. You can hit the reveal to help you with your um, writing your answers out, and then we'll just keep clicking.
Go through painful the answer over
I just wanted to click to the end, just so you can see what it is. There does give you a word at the end, but as far as I can tell, there's no checkpoint or no place for you to give that word. So don't worry. I mean, keep it that in mind, but I'm pretty sure there's no place in any of the lessons where you're going to have to give that word for a checkpoint. But just make sure don't go just fast forward through the activity like I did. Make sure you go through all the steps because it's a very powerful letter. Okay, and then at the end you have a lesson quiz. Now I want to take a moment to show you the quiz. And it's all about the I have a dream speech. So you may use, it says on the quiz, here it is. Use I have a dream primary source from chapter 35 to answer the following questions. And that's all, this is what the primary source they're referring to. Okay, so that's what your quiz is based off of. Good luck on your quiz, and we'll see you in the next lesson.